Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are joining us on the planet for this 30-minute conversation with Sebastian Wernicke about his new book, Data Inspired, uh, Building an Organizational Culture of Inquiry for Lasting Transformation. I'm JD Schramm, and I am thrilled to be here and having this conversation. I'd love to just have people drop into the comments where you are joining us from this morning. So city, state, country, time zone. We know we've got people in the US and people in Europe, potentially Asia as well. Just let us know where you are dialing in from for this conversation. For those that I haven't met personally, my name is JD Schramm. I am the author of Communicate with Mastery and have been a lifelong advocate, coach, educator, speaker, and trainer on a number of communication related topics. So when I find good writing, I want to share good writing. And my friend and colleague, fellow TED speaker, Sebastian Wernicke, is my host for today. And I'm going to read just a little bit of Sebastian's bio from his book. He's a partner at Oxera Consulting, one of Europe's oldest economics and finance consultancies, where he leads the data science and artificial intelligence practice. For 2 decades, he has guided global organizations to achieve transformative results with data and AI. His 3 TED Talks on data and decision making have been seen by millions worldwide and by some of us in person when he delivers them. Sebastian, welcome. Thanks for being with us today.
Well, it's such a pleasure to be doing this with you.
It is as well. It is as well. It's good to see the folks who are joining us from around the country and around the globe as people are dropping in. We're asking people just in the comments to drop where you are dialing in from so that we know that you are with us. And it's cool. We on our side, we see the names pop up every once in a while. So it's exciting. I will also acknowledge, well, my book has been out for a little over 6 years now. Sebastian's formally comes out next Tuesday.
Yeah, Tuesday's the day.
Indeed. Yeah. So I have an advanced copy here. And if you are interested in being in the drawing for a free copy of Sebastian's book, just drop into the comments, I'm in. And that's all you have to do to be eligible to get a free copy of his book. But you must be present at the end of this conversation in about 26 minutes because that's the only rule, is you have to be present to win. So just drop in that you're in, and we will know that you would like to be eligible for a free copy of Sebastian's book. And we'll also give a copy of mine away as well. And we will, if you have questions throughout, feel free to drop those into the comments, and we will particularly in the last 5 to 10 minutes, I want to be sure we get to audience questions as well. But I'm going to start out just with my first question. Sebastian, what led you to write this book? What first in German and now in English? What led you on that path to say the world needs this book?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a mix between frustration and trying to help people do more with data. So I sometimes describe it as therapeutic writing, if I'm a bit cynical about it. So whenever on a data project, and as you just read from the bio, I've been doing those for about 20 years, which is extremely scary if you think about it. But whenever I noticed something not quite being right, something that we should have taken care of, mostly in addition to the programming and the data cleaning and all of these things, whenever I got frustrated with these things, or especially in an argument with a client, I just wrote these things down. So I had the file called fragments.txt on my desktop that I carried from employer to employer, essentially, where I wrote these down with the hope that, if I were to get in that argument in the future sometimes, I could just point at the book and saying, we could have this argument now, but I'm sorry, it's in the book, so it has to be right, right? I mean, and you know this since you've written a book, I think it's a bit like entrepreneurs describe why they founded a company. They said, well, in the end, I just had a feeling this needs to be out there and I want these ideas or I want this product to get out there in the case of entrepreneurship. And I think in the case of the book, it's just, I want these ideas to be out there. And I have a feeling they're not out there yet. And they're also not out there maybe in a format that's fun and engaging to read. I think just the fact that a book has the words data on it can be a little scary. So I wanted to surprise people and say, okay, there's actually a fun book about data here and one that, you know.
And I will acknowledge for our viewers and listeners, it is a fun read. I have enjoyed the storytelling, the narrative, the examples that you give, and we're going to get into some of those in just a moment. I think what's good for us at the beginning of this conversation, can you just give a quick definition of data driven and data inspired? Because an organization has to go through one to get to the other, just so that people understand what we mean before we go deeper into it.
It's indeed, you have to have the stepping stone of being data driven to get to the next stage. So data driven in a nutshell is how I think most of us would intuitively think about data. So you use data for assertion, to monitor the organization, for the dashboard, and of course for optimization. So to make your processes better, to understand your customers just a little bit better. I think the most important part about this is we use data for incremental optimization. That for me is the essence of being data driven. And another aspect is that we turn to data to find answers. So we want data to tell us how to decide what's a better way to run the business, essentially. And with data inspired, that isn't going away. So you're always going to have your data-driven component, but there's so much more that you can do with data, because data cannot just be an agent for optimization. It can also be an agent for change and transformation, because I really believe that it's not just how to act today that you can find in the data, but if you ask better questions of the data, if you look to the anomalies, the outliers, then you can find the next breakthrough ideas. And that's what this culture of inquiry is all about. So we never stop asking the questions, and we're not assuming that the direction that we go in today will be the direction that we go in tomorrow. And we can use data to drive that and to help us with that.
Do you find, Sebastian, that in all the organizations you've worked with for the last couple of decades, that people are still fearful of data or concerned about using data to make decisions? Like I can just think of some of the leaders that I work with that say, yeah, the data says that, but my gut tells me, and then they make a decision to launch a product anyway.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a bit to unpack in that. I mean, there's of course still sort of the fear of the technical person, and I think for anybody who's non-technical, there's always a bit of that, right? To say, this is complicated, and will I understand that? Can I, hold my own in a discussion with a technical person? But putting that aside, I think the main thing is that intuitively we turn to data for confirmation and comfort. I think this is what I still see a lot. And we have this hope that data will come and it will bring clarity. It will bring transparency. It will show us the way. And of course, if we're in this narrow or narrower world of data-driven, I think that's exactly what data is doing, right? I want to know, okay, what if I adjust this a little bit? What if I turn that knob a little bit? But at the same time, I think data is quite complex if you observe real-world processes out there, and it helps to engage with that complexity. And I think this is something that can be quite uncomfortable. So I wouldn't say it's about sort of fear or gut feelings most of the time. I mean, you get that as well, and for good reasons sometimes, because we're just biologically wired to want to be right? But I think it's just this other way of engaging that says, okay, I'm actually not going to turn to data to make things easier for me, but to understand how difficult they really are. And ultimately to recognize that I think data is the only way today to deal with the complexity that we're seeing in the world out there, because data then enables us to do these things like understand what's going on, predict what's going to happen, automate. And how else are you going to deal with everything that's going on out there? Human bandwidth is just not enough. So it's data you have to turn to, but you have to be ready to leave the comfort zone. Very important.
I'm going to quote from you, page 15 of your book. I'm sure you have it memorized.
Certainly.
Speaking as Sebastian, this is after you go through the 10 principles to guide our reading of the book. And with these 10 principles, he gives the common misstep and the successful approach. But he summarizes those 10 steps saying, in my experience, organizations that ignore these principles will fail to become data-driven or data-inspired, and instead end up data annoyed, data frustrated, and eventually data cynical.
Yeah.
You can't name companies, obviously, but do you have experience with data cynical, data frustrated, data annoyed leaders? And how do you help them move past that?
Yeah, so I think you can tell this by a reaction you're getting sometimes at the beginning of a project where you're entering the discussion and say, okay, could we try this with data? And then you get this eye rolling, we tried this with data before. And then people will get going, right? And say, oh, we invested so much. And I still remember how they told me 10 years ago, this was going to fix everything. And you can tell they're, the amygdala hijack, and they are on a roll. And I think this is at the various stages of that data frustration and the data cynicism then in the end. And it comes from having seen failure, despite, I think, two things that you think would be sufficient. One is everybody knows it's important, right? It's not like you go in and say, have you realized that data is valuable? Of course, everybody has realized data is valuable. And also, when you ask companies, is it a priority for you? Yes, it is. And not just in words. They put immense amount of budget into tackling data and everything that's attached to it. But then they're not getting the transformative results that they've been promised. And you can really tell if they've experienced that for a couple of times, they believe it's the data's fault. It's the technology's fault. They would never think, that it could be them or maybe not having approached the project in a certain way in the past. No, it was the data. It was the vendors. They get a lot of flack for this. And the fact that culture plays a role and that you might have want to address the cultural elements of a data project or a data transformation, that takes a while to acknowledge.
I appreciate the way in your book you are both sensitive to and thoughtful about the human element of data transformation. And we'll look in a moment here at some of the principles from the book. But also, just in that last comment, you also hold the humans to account. So that you both are gentle and rigorous. Maybe a little bit of radical candor inside of that as you look at the human aspect of data-inspired or organizational transformation.
Yeah, I mean, you have to put in that part of the work as well, I think. And of course, that doesn't guarantee success in the end. But unless you have tried, I think you don't really get to complain. Maybe that's just my German way of looking at it, But I mean, I think the thing is, that this should be known in a way. And it's sometimes scary how old some of these studies are that I cite in the book about what we already know, how humans react to data, how what I would call the data deficit theory, all you need to do is bring the right data to the right person at the right time and suddenly magic things will happen. We know this not to be true. And not just as a gut feeling, science knows this not to be true. Brain scans know this not to be true. So I just think you have to acknowledge that and you have to deal with it. Now, again, the softer side of this is I completely get why you wouldn't want to do that or why the inclination is to skip that step, because it's the fuzzy step, right? The other parts, the technology, the project, the tools, the platforms, everything you buy, that's sort of straightforward. You know what you need to get. And then come in these fuzzy words, culture, transformation and the other concepts, psychological safety. And I think there's two things there. One is these topics are a bit harder to tackle because they're just not, I buy something, I set up a 3 weeks project, and then I have that. And the other one is that usually these conversations happen in completely different rooms. I mean, how many organizations do you know that discuss the technology and their culture at the same table, in the same meeting? And so there's a structural component to this as well, I think.
Yeah. Part of what you do a really nice job in the book about is acknowledging the myths around many of the analogies that are used for data. Data is the new gold. Data is like oil. Data is like bacon, which I still don't understand.
Love the bacon one. Yeah.
But can you talk just a little bit about the myths that exist out there right now around data, and how you hope that you're able to break through those myths with the book Data Inspired?
Yeah, I think for a long time, many organizations have been told that they are sitting on this treasure of data, and like a commodity, right? So just like you had all of these barrels of oil sitting somewhere in the basement, and all you would need to do is refine them, unearth them, and then you would be done. And data itself is a very unintuitive commodity. So if I take oil, for example, 2 barrels, worth twice as much as one. I can sell it pretty much anywhere. A pharma company will be able to do something with a refinery. And data is quite unique in that way, that unless it's been collected for a very specific purpose, it's actually quite hard to repurpose and to take somewhere else. Or unless it's organized, it can be very hard to use. It's also something that before you use it, you need to develop trust in. I mean, you don't need to develop trust in oil, right? But in data, you do. And then it has, of course, if you're successful with it, and this is the success component, it has these amazing properties that you can use it, and you can use it again, and you can use it again. It doesn't get used up. Actually, it accumulates, and smart use of data will generate more data. So you have all of these flywheel effects. I mean, we might wish that some commodities had these. And so the reason I get into that very early in the book is because these analogies that say data is the next X, which many people have, of course, also become tired of these days, get you on the wrong track. And I think they can sometimes distract from what you actually need to do, which is, first of all, develop a very precise understanding of what you want to do with the data and what you want from it, because only then can you actually say, do I have it? Or how do I get it? How valuable is it? So it's the other way around. You're not sitting on the treasure. You first have to define what value is for you, and then you start plugging in the data into that vision.
Yeah. The other piece I remember from that part of the book is one of the ways that analogy breaks down is, once I sell my 2 barrels of oil, I no longer have those 2 barrels of oil. But once I sell data, I still have the data. And so, yeah, there are many ways in which we have to be more nuanced in terms of how we embrace with it. We're starting to get some good questions in the chat. I want to acknowledge, if you've got a question you want me to pose to Sebastian, drop that in the chat. Before we do that, I'm gonna fast forward